Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, hello. Hello, it's so wonderful to see everybody. Woo! Hello, hello, hello. I'm Amy Cohen. I am the Assistant Vice Provost for the Nashman Center for Civic Engagement and Public Service here at George Washington University. And I am delighted to welcome you to this joint conference and party in honor of Americorps' 30th anniversary. I am often in rooms with friends, but I don't think I've been in a room with so many friends that I've known for so long, ever. And this is such a pleasure and so great to see you all here. I'm going to speak, we're going to do a little bit of program up here, and then we're going to move down for the main program this afternoon. But I want to do a couple of things. First, I want to welcome you, and I want to welcome you on behalf of the committee who helped put this event together. I'm reading out the higher ed event. The evening event has a different committee, and they'll be read out in the evening, just to be clear. But there is some overlap across the committees. So the committee for the higher ed event is Bobby Lauer, Catherine Milton, Susan Stroud, Agnieszka Nance, Elaine Akeda, who is unfortunately still in California, Elsa Nash, Gail Robinson, Kevin Days, Lindsay Revisa, Bill Basil, Joanne Weeks, and Emily Samos. These were committed people. We met at 4 o'clock on Fridays all through the summer. And all through the summer, people showed up at these meetings to talk about what we would get done here. I also want to thank our sponsors, and we're going to talk to one of them. Our sponsors are GivePulse, Tulane Center for Public Service, thank you, Agnieszka, the Nashman Center for Civic Engagement, Service Year Alliance, and Joanne Weeks. So thank you all for being a sponsor. Yes, you were. I also want to shout out our Nashman Center team. We usually do this at the end, but I'm going to do it at the beginning. We have a fabulous team who have been working on this and have gone above and beyond. Ayman Rahman, who is here, has done all the media for this. Joan Mitchell, who's off on a cruise. She came in and helped make sure that we got the lunch set up and then left for her cruise. She's our budget manager. Amy Leah Joachim, who is here and has really made this thing happen and has worked really closely. She's our assistant director. Corrales Acevedo Vegas and Maya Duffy, Corrales Acevedo Vargas, Maya Duffy, and our consultant, Emily Samos. Thank you. I also want to note that there are a couple of GW students, there's a lot of GW students supporting the conference, but there are a couple who are making the rounds through here, so you may have met them already. We have Bongani Ndebele. Bongani is our Transform Mid-Atlantic Civic Fellow. Transform Mid-Atlantic is our regional higher ed civic engagement network, and Bongani is here, not at the moment though. In addition to Lauren Patrick, who is our Newman Civic Fellow with National Campus Compact. And they've agreed to be sort of our street media team, if you will, or conference media team. And I also want to point out that we have our own Americorps Vista member, Brian McCarroll, who's helping us with photos and other things today. And Brian's so new, he doesn't have a t-shirt yet. Now I'd like to bring to the stage George Luc. I'd like to introduce George Luc to you. If you don't already know George, you will know him by the end of the day. George is the co-founder and CEO of GivePulse, and GivePulse is a platform to track and analyze service data across the country. And we were really early adopters of GivePulse. I think, 10 years, 8 years, we've been with GivePulse. And we've been able to track and report our service way better than we used to. So George, come on up. Yep. Whoops, we forgot to give him a mic. Thank you. See, we didn't practice everything.
Hello.
Have a seat. So we thought we'd just have a short conversation and a little bit of a chat. I've really enjoyed getting to know George. And I wanted to ask him why he got involved in creating a service tracking platform. So, George, what's your why?
It's a really good why. First of all, I am very starstruck. Oh my gosh, Mata is here. Okay, I'm just very starstruck because almost 14 years ago when I started the company, I didn't know everyone. And so just getting the opportunity to see everyone, I'm very starstruck. The research that you all do, Andy Furco's research to just meeting Honey Nashman a few minutes ago, it is, how do I say it? How do I put it in words? Like just completely starstruck, really an honor to meet you all that have inspired students like me to be here in front of you. But why the why, right? Man, where do I even start? So student of Virginia Tech, graduate in the year of the massacre, son of refugees, came from the rural parts of Vietnam and China, so very lucky and fortunate to be here in front of you all, to also run a social tech company that helps track service and community engagement throughout the nation. So lucky to also work with close to about 400 institutions of higher ed now. When I first started the venture, it was just one university who just gave me an opportunity. Amy was probably at least the top 30 institution that gave us a shot. So the why really just comes down to this one story that we also have on givepulse.com/about. If you guys get the chance, totally recommend you guys to check it out. It's a short story, and it's all about a router and all about giving a computer lab access to allow students to apply to college. And so the story is really just a mathematical calculation where somebody needs to fix a computer and also make sure that it has internet access so that way students can apply to college. And so if I had the chance, I'd love to tell you the story, but I know Amy has a set of questions to share, but I'll give you this. Without me knowing that 30 minutes and $30 can actually go a long way to help a computer lab give internet access to a student that doesn't have internet or a computer at home, and also informing me that she can now apply to college and also successfully go to college, changed me. Made me realize that my time and my donation, my effort can actually change someone's life. And that's what really has made me want to do this work. And if done successfully well, at scale, think of how many lives we could change. And I think, sorry, one last point before you. Because of you all represent different institutions, different spaces. I think this room is what is going to set the stage for what will happen in terms of making sure that we cover everyone and make sure that nobody's behind. Right. All right.
That is beautiful. Thank you. So I think that answers why you persist and what your aspirations are. But so I'm going to take a little I don't know, maybe actually I might get enemies for this. So back in 2005 at the Corporation for National and Community Service at the time, we started this program called the President's Higher Education Community Service Honor Roll. And our goal at that time, some of you love it, some of you hate it. Our goal at that time was just to capture the data. We knew how to capture data across the country for K-12 schools, but we were having, and not even that too well, but we didn't know how we could capture the data about higher ed programs. So I guess I want to ask you, how are you capturing the data? How big is your network? And what are your aspirations for getting all that data together? How can we use your data?
So we work with close to 400 institutions of higher ed. fortunate to also collaborate with Carnegie Foundation and the American Council on Education to help facilitate the Carnegie classification on community engagement. And so we do have the opportunity to be stewards of a lot of this data that's owned by the institution, owned by Carnegie, to do analysis and to have a deeper understanding of like where the country's moving in terms of service. There's just no doubt about that. We work with over 100,000 different various organizations and entities related to service in some type of entity, in some type of way, be it pure volunteerism all the way to service learning. And so it gets very complicated. It gets a lot of, we have so much data to a point where we had to potentially even hire Sampata, who was a former intern of George Washington University, to help us analyze the data, which is also very exciting. And I think part of the impetus of the question is really, when we have this data, we have to be cautious of how we understand and analyze the data. But how we got here, we had to actually look back into the past, because if we didn't have moments and opportunities like the Presidential Honor Roll, we would not have the opportunity right now to talk about how we have all this data. So I want to give you a shout out and say that because of that, we started at least thinking about hours, right? There's this old saying, a lot of people say, especially in the field, like counting beans, right? You guys probably hear this a lot. It's like, oh, do we need to count the beans? But I actually challenge and say, at least from a standpoint of, if you don't count the beans, how do you know that you're improving? Right? And so if you don't track it, how do you manage it, right? And so our team internally realizes that, wow, we are now shepherds of a lot of this data, and we need to be very cautious of how we understand and analyze it, and we have to help and provide resources to allow the institutions that have this data to better improve their program, better improve their curricular programs and co-curricular programs. And in doing so, how can they also provide the professional development for the community to also learn how to access and utilize their own data too as well. Because a lot of people, and we might be touching on this too as well, a lot of people worry that volunteerism is going backwards. I challenge and say it's actually increasing. And I could probably share my perspective on that later, yeah.
Well, I would love to hear your perspective on that. I mean, what are the different kinds of service that you measure? I have many compound presence. So let me just say, what are the kinds of service that you measure, and what is your sense of, I don't know what you mean by volunteerism going backwards.
Yeah. So some of the volunteerism that we track is pure episodic volunteerism all the way to research. Right? So we have institutions that leverage our system to allow faculty members that have certain skill sets to contribute their skill set in partnership with the community. I was just in Marquette. They have this amazing corporate program where they're partnering with Harley-Davidson with a few of their faculty members to identify how they can solve some community needs and community problems, right? And so our system is very broad. Like, people know us through, let's just say, how do I spread mulch and plant trees? They do go to GivePulse for that, but since we work with a large population of institutions of higher ed, we also do a lot of research too. Our system helps enable that research to happen. And so I always say curricular all the way to co-curricular, we do that, but then on top of it, it's like, how do you actually move the needle to provide the tools necessary for researchers, to students, to access these tools and make sense of this data, right? When I say go back, it's more of, back in the day, it's like hours tracking. Now it's like qualitative data. Then it's also about not only stories of impact, it's how do we actually get to a point where we know that when we're sending a student out, that they're not only learning, but they're actually feeding this one individual, and this one individual happened to fill out an anonymous survey that says that they're actually doing way better because of that one specific experience. If we could do that at scale, then we could actually collectively, in partnership with all these institutions and networks, now know close that we're making some type of, we're moving the needle somewhat, right? And that's what, and so service, I think, anybody has checked out the U.S. Census Survey and what Americorps has published, I think the number is 23.2% as of 2021, Prior in 2019, it was 30%. So it looks like we're dramatically going backwards because of COVID, a number of different things. And I think we could all agree that staffing changes, people reflecting in their life, they're like, oh, I no longer want to do this. But I would also say the organizations that we work with, the volunteer coordinators that we work with, the researchers that we work with, the teachers that we work with, actually are so passionate and intentional about this work that they're seeing the data actually go upwards, right? And so part of it is, there's just no doubt, like the sentiment or the feeling is that we are going backwards, but when individuals are given tools to actually track it and they do a good job of providing cadence of emails and stories of impact, it actually changes that directory. And so this foundation, this space here is if you actually intentionally communicate with your students, try to find that connection between students and the impact that they have in the community, I actually think it will go like soaring, right? A good story, University of Georgia, Athens, Josh there has done an amazing job. Year over year, 20% increase. Crazy. Like they are engaging their students, engaging their, like that's also because he's also been in that role for a while, no doubt about that. There's also because he has strategically worked with a number of different stakeholders from the experiential learning office all the way to alumni affairs to engage everyone, right? Not only in Athens, but the county and then across the state. Very fascinating story, yep.
That is a fascinating story. One of the things that has always impressed me about GivePulse is that we do count hours, right? We started counting hours because we had this Mrs. Obama challenge. I see Peter Konwersky in the audience, who was our vice provost for student affairs at the time. Mrs. Obama, one of our students invited Mrs. Obama to come to our campus, and she said, sure, I'll come if you do 100,000 hours of service. But then we had to figure out how the heck to count it. And you know, how were we going to verify all of that? And we didn't go with GivePulse at first. I think you were still in college.
Yeah, all good, all good. Excuse.
We went with another great platform. But one of the things that we struggle with is this hours counting is one way that we can make the beans even, to use the beans analogy, right? We're all beings, but how have you, and I know that GivePulse talks about impacts, so how do you make the jump beans or hours to impact, and how are you helping people lay that out?
Yeah, I feel like we're 40% of the way. And I'll just be very clear here that in order to understand impact, you have to have a lot of data. And my initial dream, and this we're talking about 13 years ago, my initial dream was if I had an opportunity where I could either volunteer my way to help this one individual, homeless individual, or either go to city council to tell them that we need to carve out budget to help support homeless people, or either I need to go, you know, create a sign and advocate or something like that, what can we do within that 5 minutes? In order to accomplish that, I mean, really difficult. And I only say 40% because we're fortunate that we have built a lot of momentum to get to where we're at. We have created a set of tools that we could track hours, no doubt. That's easy. We could track assessments. We can understand if people are feeling great about their volunteer experience, or if we're tracking the outputs of like what's actually happening afterwards. We do all that, but in order to really truly understand the impact, you have to have a lot of data points, which right now are in silos, right? So the open data side of things, we do have a lot of data points, but a lot of that data is also behind. As in, we only get it after the fact, after a year or a few years. And so it's hard to understand and predict exactly that if I do this, do I know my impact right now? But we're getting close. And I think technology is evolving to get there too as well. Wouldn't it be amazing if I could just go to open, you know, ChatGPT or something like that? Did I actually make an impact by just volunteering here? I don't know. Like, that would be amazing. But they won't have the story because the data is not there. But this space has the opportunity to get close to that. And even as a technologist for the past 13 years, building this company, working with hundreds of universities, I would say we're still far off from that. But we love to partner and collaborate with institutions that have that mindset, that want to get there. love to do that, right? Because we are close. We're 40% of the way. You know, talk to me 13 years ago, it was 0%. So we're getting close. These things take time, right?
That is awesome. I want to thank you for talking with us and telling us a little bit about your journey and what you've done so far. It's been a pleasure to work with GivePulse and to build this workout, and we look forward to continuing to do it. Every conference, you will see George, and you will see GivePulse, and we really appreciate it. And thank you for leading the field and leading the way. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, so we have, I don't know exactly what time it is, but we have a few more minutes to schmooze with our neighbors and chat and talk. And then we're going to transition this part of the conference downstairs to the Betts Theater on the first floor. We will convene at 1 o'clock. Downstairs at the Betts Theater, and we have such a packed agenda that we're going to hold everybody to time. Unfortunately, you can't take food into the Betts Theater, but you can take closed beverage containers. So I think we brought some closed beverage containers in here for coffee and other things. So please do that, and we will reconvene down there at 1 o'clock, and then you get to hear a lot more from me. So thank you again, George.